previously planted lands, upsetting nature. The sun goddess is so offended by his destructive acts that she retreats into a small rocky cave. As she vanishes from sight, darkness covers the earth. The other gods, distraught, try to lure her out of the cave so the world can be saved. They create a massive commotion with music and revels. And when curiosity gets the better of her and she emerges, they use a mirror to dazzle her with her own reflection while they close up the cave forever. The sun shines in the sky. Light is restored to the world. I think the story of the myth could be a metaphor for real events. Geology shows that while its coastlines were being flooded at the end of the Ice Age, changing loads on the Earth's crust sparked off volcanic chain reactions in Japan, darkening the skies for decades and perhaps bringing on a kind of nuclear winter. The imagery of the myth, with the sun disappearing into a rocky cave, is commemorated in Japan today by the sacred stones, or iwakura, we've already seen.
Iwakura is related to the small cave. Our ancestor lived in the cave. And also the goddess.
Sun goddess.
Yes. When something happened, she hid in the cave.
And the world became dark.
Yeah.
The rope or the sacred streamers are a kind of reminder of the locking of the door so that the sacred god cannot go hide again.
But is it possible that there were people here who experienced the terrors of the end of the Ice Age and left a record in myth? In most parts of the world, we know little or nothing about who was around at the end of the Ice Age. But Japan's an exception. It was inhabited by an ancient people whose sites have been excavated all over these islands. The oldest dating back to 16,000 years ago. Archaeologists call them the Jomon. Every great human culture has something special, something that it does better than anybody else. For the Egyptians, it was the pyramids. For the Greeks, the representation of the human form. And for the Jomon of Japan, it was pottery. Here's the mystery. The Jomon were a supposedly primitive hunter-gatherer culture. And yet they were the first people in the world to make pottery. Thousands of years earlier than any other culture known to archaeologists. Their pottery representations of the human figure, called dogu, express a fantastic and wonderful artistic sensibility. These strange and wonderful representations of the human form, sometimes half beast, half man. If we were to judge the Jomon purely in terms of their economic lifestyle, we would tend to say this is a rather primitive hunter-gatherer people. But when we look at their art, we hear a different story.
We truly don't understand the Jomon people. We know a lot of what you would call basic data. We have lots of figurines. What they mean, we don't know.
What's so special about the Jomon?
We certainly don't have the whole story, and never will. That's the fun part of it. We don't even have all the facts, I'm sure. I am not sure the exact number of Jomon sites. Roughly 150,000 Jomon sites. Probably half of them excavated to some extent. Millions and millions of pots, and they're just everywhere. Rarely do you see two pots that look much alike. Every time you dig a Jomon site, you find something that hasn't been found before.
I've come to Sanai Murayama in northern Japan. What they found here takes us way beyond pottery. It's considered so important to Japanese prehistory that a complete reconstruction has now been built. Discovered in 1995, it's a place that's forcing archaeologists to revise their views of the Jomon. What effect did it have on archaeological thinking about the level of Jomon culture?
Before Sanai Murayama was discovered, people had thought of the Jomon as primitive hunters, living a very basic life. But after the discovery, opinion changed. Archaeologists realized that the Jomon people were much more complex.
Here they've reconstructed a huge monument which demonstrates that Jomon had a shrewd understanding of maths and astronomy as far back as 5,000 years ago. Professor Kobayashi has studied how the Jomon created a calendar.
Point of sunset and sun rising was an exact calendar for Jomon people. They construct the monument to the special day. Many people gathered and had feast.
The sun would rise in the east at the summer solstice.
Professor Kobayashi explains how the posts are exactly aligned to mark Midsummer's Day.
Just noontime
Yes.
of the special day of midsummer,
Yes.
the shadow
Yes.
between the corridor.
The shadows from the posts exactly divide the base of the structure at midday on Midsummer's Day. It's highly unlikely to be a coincidence. And it tells us that the Jomon must have had a very long background building large, precisely oriented structures before they built this one. At Yonaguni, astronomical calculations show that the structure stood on a very significant latitude. It would have been exactly on the ancient Tropic of Cancer, a circle around the northern half of the Earth, connecting all the points where the sun stands directly overhead at midday on the summer solstice. The ancient Jomon interest in the sun could provide a rational motive for such a massive work. In my travels, I've found an extraordinary ancient people, the Jomon, and phenomenal underwater structures equally ancient. What I'm looking for is a more tangible link to bind them together. And I think I've found it. Professor Keeley told me about a little-known phenomenon: stone circles.
Sometimes the circles are of very large diameter. Sometimes they're smaller circles put together like the links of a chain. And sometimes they use megaliths.
Komakino looks like a miniature amphitheater. It happens to be on a minor slope, so you have the circle